Jace Wilson enters his second season as the Texas Southern starting quarterback as the second team All-SWAC preseason quarterback. That elevated expectation that's placed on Wilson should also result in elevated pressure on the quarterback and his team entering 2024. Oh yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And now, of course, I'm Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make it Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey's over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. On tomorrow's episode, I told you, every single Friday, we're doing evening shows. And tomorrow's episode is no different. On this Friday, we will have Coach James Williams, the Alabama State cornerbacks coach. We have been chopping up for a little bit before getting this interview recorded. And I think that it was shown because it was a very fluid, very fun interview for me to do. And I hope that it was a very fun and fluid interview, or will be a very fun and fluid interview for you to listen to tomorrow, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. So make sure you're checking that out live. Come chat with us in the midst of it all. Now, that being said, today's episode, Thursday's episode, will wrap up with a pair of Black College Football Player of the Year conversations. In segment 2, we're going to take a look at the list and some of the leaders of the list, in my opinion, guys who I think have the best chance to win this award. Then in segment 3, we'll wrap it up with players who I believe deserve to at least be on the list. And I have one guy who I think is an actual favorite. Now, let's take it to the alma mater. Texas Southern quarterback Jace Wilson. He's entering his second season as the starting quarterback. I understand that he didn't technically start last year as the starter. He didn't start until week 2, but he played the entirety of the year minus one. Minus one game, he played the entirety of the year. To me, this is his second full season as a starter. That's the way that I view it. And with that being the case, he's also entering the year with a little bit of elevated expectation. For the third year in a row, Texas Southern has the second team All-SWAC preseason quarterback. That's important because that level of expectation, or that level of expectation as an individual, I've seen trickle down to the team, because we know exactly what it means when people think you're a good quarterback. That means they think your team should win. I don't necessarily know if that's completely reflected in the way that the SWAC did their, or really the MEAC. Well, no, because Otto Coons wasn't there for the MEAC. But specifically on the offensive side, the SWAC Offensive Player of the Year, you have Myles Crawley, who Grambling isn't predicted to win the SWAC West. Jace Wilson and Texas Southern isn't even really expected to be a threat in the SWAC West. So when it comes to the polls, there's no pressure for you to win. But now this is where I deviate. This is now where I say I'm no longer going with what the polls say. The polls say he's going to be one of the 2 best quarterbacks. So that's the expectation for him. To me, being one of the 2 best quarterbacks now comes with a level of pressure to get your team success. And the reason I say that is because I just told you, Texas Southern has had the preseason quarterback, or second team all quarterback, 3 years in a row now. Andrew Body for 2 years. And now it's Jace Wilson. And I saw how Body was discussed. They start talking about success. And do I think that the clock starts for Wilson? No, yes, I do think the clock starts, but I don't think it ends, right? Like, look at it as one of those like sand things that you turn over, right? Once you turn it over, time begins. That's the clock on which he has to deliver. It doesn't run out. When it runs out, time is over. It doesn't run out this year, but it probably runs out next year. I think 2 years of once you've been labeled as a quarterback to watch, they demand you to win. But you have to take at least the proper steps in that first year. The clock doesn't run out, but there is an expectation for you to take at least a couple of proper steps. I don't necessarily believe, based off what I've seen professionally, collegiately, based on what I've seen on how we look at quarterbacks, I don't think that Texas Southern can come in and be sorry and people not point their finger at Jace Wilson. That is an elevated sense of pressure. To have to come in and win is an elevated sense of pressure on Texas Southern. The one thing that I think kind of calms that down is the fact that Chris Dishman is a first-year head coach. So with him being a first-year head coach, there's rarely a large amount of pressure on you as a team to be good. But when you have Jace Wilson as the second-team all-SWAC quarterback in the preseason, that you got to be something. You got to be something. I'm looking at a 3-4 win conference season. I feel like you can't be a basement team. You have to be a middle of the pack team. That's the expectation to me based on where they're viewing him in the pecking order of SWAC quarterbacks. And you know what? Because I want to also look at Dishman, because I think that this is important. Jace Wilson, the one knock you can have on Jace Wilson, the one knock I've seen is that he's not the tallest, right? Like I get that. You may want your quarterback to be a little bit taller. But when he's coming out of that Manning Passing Academy, everybody's saying, oh, this guy is a pure thrower of the football. And anytime you have that, I can deal with it. If you are a pure thrower of the football, and that's the way people look at you, I will always feel like I can make you be as successful as I need you to be. That is one of the best traits, if not the best trait, that I feel like represents potential to me. That's to me. I know a lot of people look at athletic ability nowadays and arm talent and arm strength as those. But for me, if you are a pure thrower of the football, I'm always going to feel confident I can get something out of you. But let's look at one thing that has changed for him. His height isn't changing. It's just what it's going to be. But Jace Wilson is changing offenses. Obviously, as a new head coach, he's going to have a new offense. He's going to go from a spread to a pro style. And this is backed up by Dishman's comments at the SWAC Media Day about running a lot of 23 and 32 personnel. I thought that was interesting because that's so abnormal from what you see typically. But it also has the potential to be able to attack a weakness of defenses. Because this is not what you normally see, because you typically see offenses that are spread out, having a more heavy set offense could attack at the lighter linebackers. The correlation is because these offenses have been spread out, now you're getting lighter defenses, you're getting lighter linebackers who are trying to kind of contain the spread offense. And now you go heavy, and it's the act where they might not be able to match you with their best personnel. So now you're able to attack defenses that are kind of set up to rush the passer in the cover, and you attack them head on with the run. So when I'm looking at Dishman, if you're telling me it's going to be a lot of 32 and 23 personnel, you're going to have a lot of tight ends on the field at one time, often. I'm looking at Jiron Johnson because Jiron Johnson was already the leading receiver at Texas Southern. But if you're going to go heavy a lot, Jiron Johnson is going to unlock because now you're going to condense formations. Jiron Johnson is going to, I think Jiron Johnson is going to eat because you're going to have him on linebackers a lot more than you probably would have last year. If he's out there in the slot, you can easily bring a safety down, have a nickel corner. You can have defensive backs on him when he's in a slot. But if we're talking about heavy condensed formations where you're going to have the tight ends on the line, now that's going to force them to stay in some more base defenses. And you're going to see Jiron Johnson get matched up with linebackers. And that's where his athleticism, to me, will really come into play. That's where his athleticism makes him a huge mismatch on a regular basis. And that's going to help Jace Wilson because that's who we're talking about. I really am interested. I was talking to some people at TSU, and they say it's multiple. It's not just going to be all 23, all 32, which is heavy tight end personnel. It's not just going to be that. What it also is going to be is a little bit of a modern twist to it. They said they have a player they're going to use like Deebo Samuel. That doesn't necessarily equate to a modern or an old school smash mouth offense. So it's going to have some modern twist in there too. It's a pro style offense though. I'll be interested because this is not what you normally see. Texas Southern running a heavy offense is going to be fascinating to me because you have Jiron Johnson, who is arguably your best receiving threat. He's a tight end. Him being a tight end will allow him to get on some linebackers more often when he's in line. When they have more condensed formation, it's going to be more difficult to put a slot corner or a safety on them. You're going to be forced to put a linebacker who will have an athletic advantage over them. This is going to be very fascinating, and I want to see how Jace Wilson, the preseason all-SWAC second-team quarterback, takes advantage of this new system in 2024. Now, as you push forward, let's look at the Black College Football Hall of Fame Player of the Year. I think that the leader in the pack is Myles Crawley, but I'll give you Crawley and two other players to watch as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime, and Gametime is the only place I would tell you to go get tickets, period. I just looked recently, I think maybe like 30 minutes before I recorded. The Aces are coming back to town on August 27th. I think I'm going to have to find a way to get out there. And the only place I go to get my tickets is Gametime, because they have zone deals where you just say, I want to sit in this zone, get me the best price, and they'll do it for you. You have flash deals. You have just in general, before you even get to the deals, the best prices that are available on the market. You can't beat them anywhere. It's really that simple. So I would tell you to go to Gametime. Either go to the website or download the app. Whenever you make your first purchase, use the code LOCKEDONCollege. That's important. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. And to me, your first purchase won't be your last purchase. You'll just keep coming back. So go ahead, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. That's Gametime. Check them out. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On College Football. It's the first of its kind, or excuse me, it's the daily one-stop shop that I will point you to if you're talking about just college football and wanting to know it all. We have shows for each college. We have shows for conferences. But Locked On College Football gives you everything about realignment, the Power 4 conferences. It's not even Power 5 anymore, trying to get adjusted to that, the top 25 polls, the big weeks. Oh, my God, everything. Spencer McLaughlin has you covered with it all, so you can be up to date and educated as we enter this collegiate football season. Now let's look at the Black College Football Hall of Fame Player of the Year watch list. Boy, that's a mouthful. And it's even crazier when you really get into the acronyms. You got the BCF, HOF, POY. That's what we're looking at. And I think that Myles Crawley is the clear leader for Player of the Year. If you're looking at the 50-man watch list that they handed out, I think he's the clear-cut favorite for Player of the Year. If we're just going to be real about it, it's going to be difficult for a defensive player to get it. Don't care the position. You can make a strong argument that last year it should have been Terrell Allen. You really can. You can make a strong argument it should have been Terrell Allen last year, and it wasn't. He was the Buck Buchanan Award winner for the best FCS player in the nation on the defensive side of the ball, and he didn't get it. And I don't know if anybody had a ridiculous offensive year for us to really fight it. So I just don't think that a defensive player is going to be there. That being said, on my snub list, I do have a defensive player who should have been included. Sometimes it's just by being included in the 50. Sometimes it's just about being included in the 50. But Myles Crawley has everything you need, man. If we're looking at the preseason offensive player of the year in the MEAC and the SWAC, I've told you, I don't think that Jared Hunter is going to win the preseason, or excuse me, I don't think Jared Hunter wins the offensive player of the year just simply based off of how Howard plays the game. I do think he's talented enough, but Eaton James, as long as he stays healthy, knock on wood, I think they're going to split a lot of carries, and it's just not going to equate to a player of the year season. That's just what I think. I just think that the whole split carries is going to hurt his case, and you're not winning the Black College Football Player of the Year if you do not win Offensive Player of the Year in your conference. We saw that last year. I'm not going to get into it because I realized I was slick hating, and it's not what I was intending to do, but I realized that that's what I was doing. But you're looking at just who's now the favorite after Hunter in the MEAC. Coons? Is Coons the favorite at Norfolk State? I just like Grambling's chances more. I just really do. And the reason I say Grambling and not just Crawley is because Grambling, to me, is going to be in the mix. Let's say that Alcorn and PV do remain the top two all the way throughout the season. Right now, the preseason projection is for them to be the two best teams in the SWAC West. I don't think that the middle of the SWAC West is going to be bad. I don't think it's going to be a these are your two top dogs and then drop off to the next group. That's not what I think. To me, if Grambling is in the middle of the pack, there'll probably be a game, maybe 2 games behind second place. Like I just think that Grambling is going to be a good team. I think they're going to be in the mix in the West, even if they don't win it. And that's enough. That's enough because you're not looking at PV's quarterback like this. You're not looking at Alcorn's quarterback like this. And a lot of times preseason expectations play a big part in it. They play a big part because a lot of people watch sports with confirmation bias. They just do. They sit there and wait for them they sit there and wait for themselves to be proven right. The things they've heard to be proven right. So if I've told you that Myles Crawley is the best quarterback in the SWAC, you're going to sit there and wait for Myles Crawley to show that he's the best quarterback in the SWAC. That's just what's going to happen. And I think he's really good. I think that he is on the short list of players who can be considered there. So it's not a crazy thing and it won't be difficult. He'll probably prove you right in the first 3 games. Genuinely. I really do think he can prove himself to be a top dog in the first 3 games. Excuse me. And he's going to be on a successful team. He might win SWAC Offensive Player of the Year. I think he has all the pieces that you need. So that's just how I look at Crawley. He has the pieces you need. He's a quarterback. He's going to be on a team that wins enough. And, it's not like Alabama A&M went crazy that year that Glass won in the fall. He just was the dog in the spring. He came back and continued to be a dog in the fall. That's just what happened. Alabama A&M wasn't great, but good enough. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, anyway. So I think he probably ended up being the best quarterback in the SWAC West, at least. Then you have a sneaky pick, and that's Isaiah Freeman out of Lincoln. This is a guy that Gerald loves telling me about. Gerald Huggins loves telling me about Isaiah Freeman out of Lincoln. Obviously, he was at Lincoln, but this is a D2 player. That's the reason I call it sneaky, because that's rare. It's only happened once. I think it was Amir Hall who won that year. I think that's the only D2 player who has won the Black College Football Player of the Year. But it didn't matter last season about what Lincoln did. It didn't matter last year with Lincoln going 2-3 in the conference, 4-6 on the season. That didn't stop Freeman from winning the Offensive Player of the Year in the CIAA. Excuse me. So I don't know if Lincoln has to be great this year, but if they're solid, I think Freeman could do it because you look at it, man, the dude's good. You know how good you got to be to win Offensive Player of the Year on a bad team? It's rare. It's rare, especially at quarterback where they attribute a lot of your ability to the success of the team. Like, hey, if you're that good, you're gonna win. Like, it's not that easy, but that's how people talk about it. But I think that Gerald mentioned, let me see which game it was. I think it's Morgan State. Yeah. So it's Lincoln versus Morgan State. That was the game that Gerald mentioned when talking about Freeman. That's the money game. If Isaiah Freeman can come out and have a good game against Lincoln, we're having a completely different conversation about Freeman. We're having a completely different conversation about whether or not he can win Player of the Year. If Isaiah Freeman comes out and plays well against Morgan State, one of the best defenses in the country, he goes up against an actual FCS opponent, which is the only one they have on their schedule this year, and he plays well, we're having a different conversation about Isaiah Freeman. This is one of the best defenses. It's upper subdivision, and you play well. Isaiah Freeman has the chance to make himself a name against Morgan. It's in the middle of CIAA season. I don't know why it's just right there in the middle, but it is. I can't wait to watch it. Then I'm going to go with one more on the D2 ranks. We're going to go Jada Byers, Virginia Union. We just talking about Gerald. Let's talk about his alma mater. I don't know if Byers can get 2,000 yards again, 1920 on the ground, another 100 and some change through the air. Most people don't achieve that twice in their life, so it's kind of a rarity of a season. It sucks for him that Shedeur just happened to go crazy that year, so he really shouldn't have got the Offensive Player of the Year, the Black College Football Player of the Year. But he's shown the ability to run for 200 yards consistently. I think he could get a 1,500-yard season. I really do. I think that Jada Byers can get a 1,500-yard season, a double-digit touchdown season, and that'll probably be enough to get himself in the conversation of being the Player of the Year. These are 3 players who maybe they aren't your 1, 2, 3. I think Crawley is your 1. I really do. He's on a good team with Grambling. He's gonna have the yards. He's the leading returning quarterback in passing yards and passing touchdowns. I just think he has all the makings, and he's a quarterback. And this is a quarterback award, has been since 2020. I think Freeman's just a sneaky pick. And Byers, he has the star power to be able to come up and snatch this for the D2s. I really do think that. But let's move to players who aren't on the list, who should be on the list. I have 3 guys, one from Alabama State. I think you know who is going to be. And then you have 2 players from Jackson State who I would have liked to seen on the list. And we'll break that down as we continue with Locked On HBCU. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Now, we went through 3 players who I think are leaders on that list. It was a 50-man list. You got special teamers, you had defense, you had offense. I told you, I don't think a defensive player is winning it. No disrespect. I just don't think when you look at the way that this has been going, I just don't think it's going to be a defensive player, right? So, but I do have a defensive player on my snub because part of this is just making a list. If you're going to include defensive players, I think you should include defensive players that I feel like should have made the list, right? Like I can feel like they don't have a chance, but I know what the parameters are to fit here. It's like I made the criteria. I met the criteria, but I wasn't on the team. That's how I feel about this. But listen, let's settle in. Let's go straight to it because we're gonna get to the defensive player after this. The first snub that I have, the first snub on this list is Andrew Body. I find it very interesting how Andrew Body has kind of been erased. It's confusing to me because if you rewind a year, he's everywhere. He's on all of these lists. He's a second team preseason all-SWAC quarterback. He's on this list for the player of the year watch list. And then he goes a year and poof, he's gone. I don't get it. He played one game. He played one game last year, and it was against PV. He had some high highs and some low lows. I didn't love the game last year. I thought it was too many turnovers, but he did show his talent. He showed the reason you believe in Andrew Body. But then he made some late game turnovers. I don't know what that was about. If he was playing hero ball, he felt like he had to put the team on his back. If he was just because they were up, they were up, so he didn't feel that. I don't know what it was. He did have some bad interceptions in that game. Maybe he was trying to overcompensate for an arm that wasn't fully healed. But regardless, that PV game wasn't enough for me to take him all the way off all of these lists. I was okay with him not being the second team preseason quarterback. The reason I was okay with that is because you only got 2 options. There's 50 players here. There's 50 players on this list, and you're trying to tell me that of the 50, Andrew Body didn't have a single place he could be as far as people we think stand a chance to be the player of the year? And as much as I say that Crawley has all of the pieces, Body has all the pieces. Crawley is uber talented. Body is uber talented. Crawley is on a team that I think is going to be solid. Andrew Body is on a team that people think is going to be the best in black college football. I'm not trying to put one over the other. What I'm saying is they both belong on the list. And I can say a lot of the things I said for Crawley, minus the whole preseason expectation, I can regurgitate those same points for Body. Please don't think that I'm putting down Crawley to put up Body. That's corny. I'm not doing that. But what I am saying is that they share some traits that make me say they belong on the list. A little confusing that Body's not here, but it does feel like everybody just forgot about him. Everybody just said, oh, yeah, the Andrew Body guy from Texas Southern, he's not there anymore. Andrew Body is an extremely talented quarterback who's on a team that people think is going to win the Celebration Bowl or be a representative in the Celebration Bowl. If Body plays the way I think he should, and then Alabama State achieves the things that I think they should achieve, what are we talking about? Not only do I think that Andrew Body should have been on the list, I think Andrew Body should be one of the favorites. My point about it, that's the biggest snub. I'm shocked. I'm shocked that Andrew Body isn't on this 50-man list of who could be the best player. I'm not trying to tell you to get rid of. I don't know who I'm trying to tell you to get rid of, because I ain't going to call nobody out. You probably could have got rid of an offensive lineman. We know they're not winning. We know they're not winning. You could have got rid of an offensive lineman. Barely any quarterbacks on there as is. But that's another statement for another day. Irv Mulligan, he's a guy who I think is a dog. He's a guy who we're having a different conversation about if he doesn't get hurt last year. Maybe that's the thing about Biden. Maybe they feel like he's just not going to come back from the injury the same. Maybe that's what it is. But anyway, Mulligan, same with him. Maybe they don't think he'll come back from the injury the same. Mulligan was a dog in the beginning of the season. Mulligan was really good. I think people forget about it because Ladarius Owens came in and had a really strong year, and he took off, and he did have more yards per game. So he probably still would have been at the top of the conference. But Irv Mulligan for a long time was hovering around that 100-yard mark per game. Irv Mulligan very well could be 1,000-yard running back this year. It wouldn't shock me, and it shouldn't shock you. So I think that he is a legitimate snub here because to me, if you're talking about top running backs, he's of that ilk. He's in those conversations with the best running back in this team who's going to be the most productive. And you have Morgan, they're probably going to run the ball a lot. And I can see a lot of read option. I can see a lot of things that put Mulligan in a position to where the defense has to choose. And if they don't choose Mulligan, it could be deadly. And he's strong. He's fat. He has the makings of a really good running back. He should have been on this list. Come on. And then lastly, we're going back to that Jackson State well. That's actually why I didn't want to put Jacoby Morgan on here because I didn't want to go OD with the Jackson State Tigers. But Robert McDaniel, need I remember you? Need I remind you? Excuse me? Boom, let's do it. Numero uno. Numero uno. It's number one in Spanish. He's the number one player on our HBCU top 10 list. I think he should have been here. But you know what? The thing about Gerald in his top 10, with him specifically at number one, there was a lot of foresight here. There was a lot of foresight of what he could be if you use him at the right position. Maybe they didn't use the whole, we're going to project, we're just going to go solely based off what we've seen. Even then, he was a pretty talented player. To me, he had 3 interceptions, and 2 of which were against SFA and Southern Miss. We sit here and we talk about FCS games all the time. He delivered. They had, 3 non-conference games, and he got interceptions in 2 of them. To me, he delivered. That's all I'm saying. And I think he delivered at the times that you want him to, and there has to be some credit for that. Robert McDaniel, whether he's outside, inside, safety, whatever, he's a versatile piece, and we think that he'll be best used at safety. This, to me, this is the player who should have been on the list. My 3 snubs: Andrew Body, Irv Mulligan, Robert McDaniel. We got 3, or almost said 3 Tigers. We got 2 Tigers and a former Tiger turned Hornet. Speaking of a former Tiger turned Hornet, James Williams will be here on tomorrow's episode. He is now the Alabama State cornerbacks coach, and he is a Texas Southern Hall of Famer. I got a Hall of Famer joining the team, y'all. He's coming on for the show tomorrow, 7 p.m. Central. Make sure that you enjoy yourself. Get yourself a beverage. Get yourself something to eat. Sit down and enjoy the show. Until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care. Stay blessed. Peace.